Well, I was running a little behind. I came in from the lake. You ever have like a home project and you kind of are thinking, man, we can do this. We can do this. Man, I tell you that me and the doc, I mean, we hate each other. It's obvious that it hates me.
But this is different than the bridge. I remember the bridge stories. Where
Yeah,
you
that.
overbuilt the bridge and you weren't permitted for it.
Okay, it's part of it. The bridge goes to the dock.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, well, now that I think about it, the dock, I ought to just blow that thing up in a second. So when they build it, the flooring's down and there's posts, and there's posts, and whoever, the guy that put it in never thought, well, these posts sit on wood that will rot. Now the post is good, but the wood under it is rotten and everything. So I said to Jordan, I said, I think we can do this. I've seen on YouTube. We just get a lift, we get some, peer supports, and so Friday after working a little bit, I go to the Sunbelt Scaffolding in Bessemer, and they bring out these things that are, they're metal and they go up like 12 feet, and you got to spin it, and but they're huge, and I've got my Infinity because I was thinking they would shrink up some, and the guy brings it around, and I could tell I was in the wrong place because I'm in an Infinity and everybody else are in big trucks. And so he brings it around and he says, "Sir, there's two huge guys. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you load these." And I said, "Well, that's a problem." He said, "Yeah, because in a vehicle, we had an incident where we broke a light, or somebody said we broke a light, and so we had to pay for the light." And I said, "Well, here's the deal. Number one, don't break a light. Let's just put them in the back. Number two, if we do, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to tell him." So he's like, "I'm sorry." So I start trying to load these things, and it reaches the point where the guys feel so bad for me that I'm loading, and then I'm getting it far enough, and then I have to go up to the door and pick it up so it does, and I feel it lightening, and I was like, "Thank you so much." So I go back and get the other one, and by the third one, the guys were just doing it themselves. I was like, man, how pitiful am I that they're like, this guy doesn't stand a chance. And so we get down there, and let me just say this. We worked a lot yesterday. I wasn't going back. I'm going back this evening, and we will work more tomorrow. People were driving by because what I realized is I didn't have the jack kind. They've got them where you can do it, and then and it raises it up so you can move the post. So I'm like, well, doggone. So never fear. I have a big, I think it's like a 2-ton car jack or tractor jack. It's like, so we're jacking up the post. So I'm setting the post on top of the jack. Jordan's jacking it up. Then we're setting these other, y'all, my neighbor came over, and I was like, "Jeff, for the love, could you leave?" Because he's like, "Wow, so you're jacking it up. What if that gives?" I was like, "I guess we're gone." I mean, I don't know what to tell you. So I tried to get Jordan and my son-in-law today, And Jordan's like, Dad, I really feel like you need to be here as we do this. So I come, waking up this morning was an experience because of that. And as I would roll over at night, last night, I was like, oh, and so man, what a chore. And then I go by and pick up food for the guys I pick up in Bessemer on my way in. And one of the guys he loves apple juice. Well, I went to Hardee's instead of McDonald's. They don't have apple juice, so I got him high C. He goes to pick up the high C, and it just exploded. Oh no! And so I'm driving, so it's been a morning. So now my console feels like stickum. But whatever it takes to serve. Hey, John 21. We're going to finish up the book of John. Then we're going to go back to some prophets of the Old Testament. And but what a great study of the book of John. We're going to be in chapter 21, but right before 21, at the end of 20, John makes this statement. He says, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." So, the book of John for a new believer, if you're trying to get them plugged in is a great book to refer people to get to know Jesus and to know the reality of who he is. You ever notice that things seem to sometimes repeat themselves? The reality is there's nothing new under the sun. And so before we get into 21, we need to look back to Luke 5. And Luke 5 is the calling of the first disciples, okay? And it's important that we know this as we talk about what's going to take place today. Luke 5, verse 1 says this: "On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God," so Jesus is about his business, and people are starting to hear about him and they're pressing in. He was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. And he saw two boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. We're going to find out that they had fished all night and caught nothing. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, Peter's, he asked him to put out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night, and we took nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets." So from the very beginning, we see Peter saying, your word matters. What you say matters. And because you say it, I will do it. And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. So many fish that their nets were breaking. Keep that in mind, nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. So there's in the amazing miracle, the nets are breaking, the boats are sinking, things are crazy. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." In that moment, when the miracle's happening, there's chaos. You can get caught up in the tearing of the nets and the sinking of the boat, or you can fall down at the knees of Jesus, at the feet of Jesus, and say, "Lord, I'm not worthy because you are the King." So the first thing that I want us to kind of think about is whatever's going on in our life, the chaos that takes place around life, be sure that we're focused at the feet of Jesus. And so in verse 9 it says, "For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, and were partners with Simon. And Jesus said to Simon, 'Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching man.' And when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed Jesus, followed him." All right? Jesus does things, the Lord does things in your life that are amazing how they tie together. Okay? Full circle, we know the story of the gospel, Simon becoming Peter, the rock. We know of all the different experiences that take place. And then we're brought this morning to look back and remember. For time's sake, I'm not going to get, but the denial that took place 3 times before the rooster crowed, 3 times the denial when this great man of God who had committed, not over my dead body, Lord, there's no way. I will not let this happen, denies him 3 times. Okay? Today we come full circle with both of those experiences. Both of those experiences, thinking back, and we see how the Lord uses our past to impact our present to make a difference in our future. Okay? He uses our past to impact our present to make a difference in our future. Chapter 21 of John. Jesus is resurrected. He's been in front of the disciples twice that we know about. Once without Thomas, once with Thomas. And in verse 21, we're going to find that Peter does what he does when he is passing time, when he wants to enjoy his hobby of fishing, when he wants to work. He's going to do what he does, and Jesus knows right where to find him. After this, Jesus revealed himself to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. Those first few paragraphs, basically Peter says, "Hey guys, I'm going fishing." And the other guys, there's like 7 other guys or 6 other guys, they say, "Hey, we'll come with you. We'll all go fishing." And so they go out and they fish all night. And in verse 4, just as the day was breaking, let me back up. So they go fishing, and that night, similar to a previous story, they caught nothing. So verse 4, just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" Has anybody here ever been fishing and caught nothing? I have on more than a few occasions, and it is miserable. "Do you have any fish?" And they answered him, "No." Now that's not no. That's how I answered the guys that wouldn't load those posts yesterday. I did use a word that was inappropriate, and I did say, and that comes from a Christian. So this was an emphatic no. And Jesus said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." I mean, it kind of gives me shivers to think about, in the midst of this situation, Jesus takes an experience of old to basically say, "I'm right here, baby." He says, "You guys, how do you think I've heard that before." You know what I'm saying? I've been there before. These fishermen are on the boat, and they got to, in that moment, just be like, wow, something amazing is going to happen. I've experienced this before. And Jesus is on the shore without accident, reminding them that I've done this before and I'll do it again. Sometimes when we don't catch any fish, when we've had a really long night, when we need to remember what Jesus has done before, how he handled it before, because in the midst of that comes great security. So it says, so they did. They cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. Remember that? It's happened before. That disciple whom Jesus loved, which is John, therefore said to Peter, hey, that's the Lord over there. That's the Lord on the shore. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, now you can only imagine how he felt coming after the Niles, coming after all his experience. And when he heard it, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself in the sea. And the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from land, but about 100 yards off. And when they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, hey, bring some fish with you, some that you have caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although they were so many, something different happens. The net was not torn. Jesus can take us from an experience where he's handled it before. And what I want you to know is he can teach us from that experience and take us to a new experience that we can trust him, and he can overcome even the nuances and frustrations of the past. Because in the past, they're frantic, the nets are breaking, the boats are sinking. This situation, by all accounts, they caught, it actually says it's 153 big fish. The nets don't break. The nets don't break. He says, so they bring it ashore, and although there were so many, the nets were not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared ask him who you are. They knew that it was the Lord. And Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. We're about to go into the parallel to Peter's denial. But before we get into that, it's really important to know that God knows, the Lord knows where you are and what you're doing, and he will be on the shore when in life you catch no fish. When your frustrations, your problems, your animosities in life hit you square in the face, and you've worked hard all night and you've caught no fish, Jesus will find you there. Just like he did when he found them to begin with and said, follow me. He's about to go in with Peter and basically say, now follow me. I'm not going to be here, but you still need to follow me. It is amazing to think from the start to this, the depth of the relationship. And so what I found myself doing is thinking about, frankly, when I started teaching Sunday school in Orlando, Florida, and how I would do things and teach, and the depth of relationship. It's 30 some years later. The depth of relationship. And so my challenge to me, is the depth. Is the depth. Because Jesus has things he wants us to do, just like he had with Peter. He has things that he wants you to do in the space that you are and beyond. And so he wants to go deeper. He wants to go deeper. And so Peter finds himself at this moment where the past has repeated itself. It's amazing how Jesus is speaking to him and reaching him, and now he pulls Peter aside. Because he's going to take Peter to even the deeper, furthest level. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think they talked before that? Because it said they didn't dare ask him who he was. So do you think they just chatted lightly? I mean,
I think on the boat, I think they knew they knew who he was. And so it's one of those things, there's no need to even have the conversation because we know who he is.
So it wasn't like an awe, but it was maybe a comfortable breakfast?
I think it was both. I got a feeling those guys in that boat, they knew, Mark, get out. They knew who he was by the experience that they had, and you know, so there was no need to debate, talk about who it was. I think they knew who he was.
I always wondered about that phrase too. They didn't dare.
Yeah, it feels like there was like a spirit of fear or quiet, or like they just ate quietly.
Well, no, I think that they didn't dare because there was no need to. I don't think it was a. What's that?
It might look different. I mean, a little bit of the air of, you know, when Moses came down and you recognize it,
Well, his physical appearance.
Well, he blind people.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus can do whatever he wants to, but clearly he was revealing himself to them through connection with an experience. That the legend of the calling of the disciples, y'all know that they probably had talked about that a million times around. Man, let me tell you, when Jesus called us, we had fished all night. And, I mean, they're guys. So they're going to tell the bigger story. They're just like us. Yeah, and so they've talked about this. So I think the concept of they didn't dare say, because they all knew. So why debate it? Why bring it up? Why, you know?
This is the third time they've seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, again, you know, Jesus can do whatever Jesus wants to do, and obviously, you know, we know, like Mary, when she saw him after he was resurrected, she didn't recognize him at first until he spoke to her. So I don't know the depth of what that means, but obviously in all three occasions, they knew it was Jesus. The first two times, he showed them his hands and feet. His side and his hands and I guess his hands and his side, to help them identify who he was. You got to know this was still huge to them that Jesus, who they watched crucified, buried, is now among them, and they're out fishing, not far off the shore. So it's not like they were so far out that they couldn't. And kind of all of a sudden, Jesus is there, and he's built a fire, and there's charcoal, which means the fire's been burning for a while. Okay, it's so, and he's cooking fish. Well, where did he get the fish? Where did he get the bread? Did he bring it with him? I have no idea. He's Jesus, you know, and so it's really a cool, comforting, thrilling recount of what has happened before, and Jesus is using it to draw them unto himself. But the challenge that we see with Peter is he wanted to take him deeper. He wants to take the mistakes of Peter, which was the denial. He wants to take those and use those to go deeper. He's not chastising Peter. He's not, and sometimes we get caught in the things that we've done wrong, and sometimes if we get caught in them, they duplicate themselves, and we can spiral away I mean, I have this conversation with Dawson Ray all the time. If you focus so much on the past and what you've done wrong, the future just turns into a glob of mess ups. But if you'll use the past, learn from the past, and let God take you deeper and further, then he'll do amazing things. And so it says in 21 in verse 15, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter. Now we don't know if he said this in the presence of the others or he pulled them away, but we know he's addressing him one-on-one. We also are very confident that everybody else, for the reasons I gave, knew about Peter denying him 3 times. And so maybe everybody's learning from the conversation with this one follower, this one man. He says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Okay? Let me address the more than these. There's kind of several things that commentaries say that's going on. Some people read it like, hey, all these other 6 or 7 guys, they love me, but do you love me more than they do? Okay? And when you first read it, that's kind of what you think he may be saying, I don't think that he's comparing that myself. I think in part what he's saying is, Peter, you love these guys. Do you love me more than you love them? It goes back to, we could go to Luke where Jesus said, unless you hate your father and your mother and your family and put priority on me, and that word hate, we could talk about what that means, but he's not saying hate in animosity or anger. He's saying priority. Above your wife, above your father, above your mother, above everything else, you need to be following with priority Jesus. Because it's only there that your relationship with others can be right. Jesus has got to be number one. And many times when there's issues between father and mother and sons and husbands and wives, many times from a lot of counseling, I can tell you, it's because Jesus is secondary in the picture. And so I think what he's saying is, do you love me more than you love these guys that you hang out with every day, that go fishing with you, your friends? The other interesting commentary is, for all we know, Jesus may have been looking at the boat and the fish and saying, Peter, man, I know you love fishing. I know you love that boat. I know you love spending time on the water. I know you love the catch, the thrill of the catch. Do you love me more than you love your hobbies, your habits, your livelihood? And I thought, well, that was a new thought to me. But he's saying, do you love me more than these? And we're going to see that he asked him this 3 times, paralleling the denials. He said to him, this is Peter, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, feed my lambs. I'm going to read through it and then I'm going to come back. Lynn, get out.
I'm sorry, I have to go get one more.
You can.
Yes, that we're gonna have.
Yeah, I was about to say. It's interesting that strategically they chose the Garnetts to welcome. So he said to him, this is Jesus, a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, then tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter's just got to be, I don't know if I'd be frustrated or I'd be sad thinking, correlating to what I've been through. Peter was grieved. Kind of answered what I was just saying. He was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And Peter said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, When you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. And this he said to show by what kind of death he was to be glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him what he had said at the very beginning, follow me. Man, that's brutal. The foretelling, obviously, is Peter is going to die a death. He's going to be crucified. And at his own request, he asked to be crucified upside down. Because he said, in the very end, I'm not worthy to be crucified, executed like my Lord and Savior. So turn me upside down. What's interesting about the charge is, the charge of Peter here is this. He asked him 3 times, and 3 times he gives a different response. In each of them, if there's love, Peter, if there's love, there's service. He asked us the same thing. If you love me, the Bible says in John, if you love me, you will what? Obey me. If you love me, you'll be about my business. If you're connected to him, the vine, you can bear much fruit. But apart from him, you can do what? Nothing. Not anything. And so what he's saying to Peter here is 3 times, I'm asking you if you love me. You're saying you know that I love you, and I do. But I want you to know the depth of the love takes you further in your service. So I think every one of us, including myself, have to think about the depth of our love. And is it taking us deeper and further in his service, whatever it's going to be? Now, what's interesting is he gives 3 different levels, if you will, and I'll finish up here. He says, number 1, feed my lambs. Number 2, tend my sheep. Number 3, feed my sheep. First, he says, feed my lamb. Feed my lambs. What he's saying is that there are babies. We don't know if he's referring to babies of the faith or if he's referring to people that have not yet come to a relationship. But a lamb is a baby sheep, right? It's a baby sheep. And so what he's saying is, Peter, go out there, and if you love me, be the rock that I know you can be. Use all the experience you got and reach people for the King. He's saying, if you love me, be about my business and share your testimony, your experience. Share the fact that you were called to follow me the first time by catching a bunch of fish, and you were called after the resurrection to follow me before the ascension by catching a bunch of fish. And so I think it says to us, are we reaching people for the Lord? The second, he says, if you love me, then tend my sheep. Well, once a lamb comes of age, after 1 year old, after they develop, they are now a sheep. So the first step is to feed the lamb. Okay? Take care of the young. Bring them into the fold. The second is to tend the sheep. What does tending of the sheep mean?
Care for their safety.
Care for their safety. What? Watch over them. Take care of them. Lead them. Guide them. What he's basically tending to the sheep is done by who? It's done by a shepherd. He's saying, bring them in, and then if you really, really love me, take care of them. Be the shepherd to the sheep that I give you responsibility for. My question, the thing that this calls, the Bible always calls us to a mindset and an action, is, are we reaching those that are lost? Are we reaching the lamb? Are we feeding the lambs? And then are we shepherding them? And then the third and the final one, which goes even deeper, he says, and make sure if you love me, you'll feed my sheep. You'll feed my sheep. 1 Peter 2:2 says this, like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. Pure spiritual milk. What he's saying in feeding the sheep is don't let them just become sheep and sheep for the slaughter. Keep feeding them. The word of the Lord, Jesus, when he was tempted by Satan, and Satan used some scripture to try to manipulate, Jesus said, man does not live by what? Bread alone, but by what? Every word of God. What he said is, feed my sheep. Once they're in, and you fed them the truth, then be their shepherd, and then keep telling them the truth and feeding them the truth of my word. If you love me, you'll do these things. So to me, as I went through this and closing out John, he's taken us through a journey. We just read some of the first of the journey. And the goal is to get us to know Christ, to get us to go deeper. That's what I think on Memorial Day, maybe, tomorrow, you spend time thinking about. You spend time praying about. Are you further in your relationship with Jesus, in your love of Jesus, that your life reflects feeding the lambs, tending the sheep, and then feeding the sheep? Man, that's a great life lesson and a great place to spur us to move forward. So, man, I hope everybody has just a wonderful, great Memorial Day and a day off, and I pray that you'll think about these things. And Jeff, would you close us in prayer?
Father, it's come before you now, Lord, we just thank you for this message for me today, Lord. Let us, in this time, have a Bible for you. Let us find those lambs that are out there and just share the good news with all of them. And all that we do, let's glorify your name. We thank you for your Son who came down on the cross so we might have everlasting life. We ask this in your precious name.
Amen. Thank you, buddy. Y'all have a great week.